The crack of a rifle split the silence as the stagecoach lurched violently to one side, sending Lillian Evans tumbling across the leather seat. Her heart hammered against her ribs as another shot rang out, splintering the wooden frame inches from her head. The Colorado mountains that had seemed so majestic only moments before now loomed like silent witnesses to her potential demise. "Get down, madam," the driver shouted before a bullet found him, his body slumping forward over the reins. Lillian pressed herself against the floor of the coach, the fine fabric of her traveling dress collecting dust and grime. The spring of 1876 had promised new beginnings when she'd left Boston for Animas Forks, Colorado, not an early grave in a mountain pass. Outside, hoofbeats thundered closer as rough voices called to one another. "Check for valuables. Hurry up." The stagecoach rocked again as someone climbed onto the step. Lillian clutched her small pearl-handled derringer, knowing its single shot would do little against the band of outlaws. Just as the door began to open, another shot cracked through the air, different, more distant, and the man at the door crumpled with a cry. "That's Perkins," someone shouted. "Someone's shooting from the ridge." More shots followed in quick succession, methodical and precise. Lillian heard horses whinnying in panic, men cursing, the thunder of retreating hoofbeats. Then silence fell, broken only by her own ragged breathing. Minutes that felt like hours passed before the door to the stagecoach swung open. Lillian raised her derringer with trembling hands. "Easy there, madam," a deep voice cautioned. "I'm not looking to cause you harm." The man who stood framed in the doorway blocked the sun, casting his face in shadow, but she could make out broad shoulders beneath a worn leather vest, a bandana around his neck, and a Stetson pulled low over his eyes. The rifle in his hand still smoked faintly. "The bandits?" she managed to ask. "Gone. For now." He holstered his rifle and extended a hand. "Tyler Parsons, madam. Most folks just call me Ty." With hesitation, Lillian took his hand, noting the calluses that spoke of hard work, and allowed him to help her from the stagecoach. Outside, the full tragedy of the situation became clear. The driver lay slumped in his seat, and one of the horses was wounded, breathing heavily. "I'm Lillian Evans," she said, straightening her spine despite the tremor in her voice. "I'm afraid I owe you my life, Mr. Parsons." He nodded once, eyes scanning the horizon with practiced vigilance. "We need to move. Those men might return with reinforcements. We're still a day's ride from Animas Forks, and night's coming." Lillian glanced at the fallen driver, feeling a wave of sorrow. "We can't just leave him." Tyler's expression softened slightly. "No, madam, we can't." He moved to the driver, closing the man's eyes before carefully lifting him down. "We'll give him a proper burial, but then we need to move. These mountains get dangerous after dark, and not just because of bandits." As Tyler dug a shallow grave using a small fold-up shovel from his saddlebags, Lillian gathered wildflowers from the roadside. She knew nothing about the driver except that he'd tried to warn her when the attack began. It seemed insufficient to mark his final resting place with only mountain blossoms, but it was all she could offer. After a brief, solemn prayer, Tyler helped Lillian onto his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, and mounted behind her. "What about my luggage?" she asked, glancing back at the stagecoach. "We'll have to leave it. Can't risk the extra weight, and we need to make good time." His arms reached around her to take the reins, warm and solid. "I know a place we can shelter for the night. It's not fancy, but it's defensible." As they rode away from the stagecoach, Lillian felt the reality of her situation settling over her like a heavy blanket. All her carefully packed possessions, the letters of introduction, the teaching contract, her mother's jewelry abandoned on a mountain pass. Yet she was alive. thanks to the man whose chest pressed against her back with each movement of the horse. "You're not from these parts," Tyler observed as they navigated a narrow trail that wound between towering pines. "No, Boston. I'm to be the new schoolteacher in Animas Forks," she replied, trying to focus on conversation rather than the precariousness of their position. "Boston," he repeated with a hint of amusement. "Long way from home." "That was rather the point, Mr. Parsons." He chuckled, the sound reverberating through his chest against her back. "Running from something, then," Lillian stiffened. "I prefer to think of it as running toward something." "Fair enough." He guided the horse around a fallen tree, "and it's just Ty." "Mr. Parsons makes me sound like my father." The trail grew steeper, and Lillian found herself leaning back against Tyler's solid frame for stability. The mountains loomed on all sides, painted in deepening shades of purple and blue as the sun began its descent. Despite the circumstances, there was an undeniable beauty to the rugged landscape. "Why were you on that ridge?" Lillian asked suddenly. "It seems a remarkable coincidence." There was a pause before he answered. "I've been tracking that gang for 3 days. They've hit 2 other coaches this month." "Didn't expect them to strike here, though." "You're a lawman, then?" Another pause. "Used to be. Now I just hunt bounties when I need the money." Before Lillian could inquire further, Tyler brought the horse to a stop. "We're here." Here was a small cabin nestled against the mountainside, partially hidden by a stand of aspens. It looked weathered but solid, with a stone chimney and a small corral for horses. "You're home?" Lillian asked as he helped her dismount, her legs stiff from the unaccustomed riding. "More of a way station. I keep a few around these mountains." He led his horse to the corral, where a small stream provided fresh water. "It's not much, but it's dry and defendable." Inside, the cabin was simple but neat: a single room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table and chairs, a narrow bed in one corner, and shelves stocked with provisions. Tyler efficiently started a fire while Lillian stood awkwardly, uncertain of her role in this unexpected situation. "You should sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. "You've had a shock." The simple acknowledgement of her ordeal nearly undid her composure. Lillian sank into the chair, her hands trembling anew as the events of the day crashed over her. "They killed him without hesitation," she whispered. "The driver, I didn't even know his name." Tyler paused in his task of heating water for coffee. "Jim Hollister, good man, wife in Denver, 2 grown sons." He placed a tin cup of water on the table. "Drink, it'll help." Lillian obeyed, watching as he moved around the cabin with the ease of familiarity, setting out jerky and hardtack. "You knew him. These mountains aren't as big as they seem. Everyone knows everyone one way or another." He sat across from her, his features softened by the firelight. Without the shadow of his hat, she could see his face clearly for the first time, weathered by sun and wind, with lines at the corners of eyes that were a startling shade of blue. A scar ran along his jawline, disappearing into several days' worth of stubble. "I should have asked, are you injured?" he inquired, his gaze assessing. "No, just shaken." Lillian smoothed her rumpled dress, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance, "and grateful if you hadn't been there." "But I was," he said simply, cutting off the dark path her thoughts were taking. "Eat something. Tomorrow will be a long day." They shared a simple meal in relative silence. Afterward, Tyler insisted she take the bed while he would sleep by the fire. Despite her protests about propriety, exhaustion won out, and Lillian found herself sinking onto the narrow cot, wrapped in a rough woolen blanket that smelled of pine and wood smoke. Just before sleep claimed her, she heard Tyler step outside, presumably to check the perimeter. Even in her exhausted state, Lillian recognized the irony of her situation. She had traveled west to escape the confines of Boston society, to build a life on her own terms. Instead, her very survival now depended on a stranger with calloused hands and eyes the color of a summer sky. Morning arrived with soft light filtering through the cabin's single window. Lillian woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting the events that had brought her to this rustic shelter. The smell of coffee brought her fully awake, and she found Tyler already up, tending a small fire. "You slept sound," he commented, pouring coffee into a tin cup. "Figured you needed it." Lillian accepted the cup gratefully, aware of her rumpled appearance and wishing desperately for a comb and fresh clothing. "What time do we leave?" "Soon as we've eaten. If we push hard, we can reach Animas Forks by nightfall." He paused. "The stagecoach wasn't due for another day. No one will be expecting you yet." The thought was oddly comforting. At least she wouldn't be missed. "Do you think those men will come back?" Tyler's expression darkened. "Not likely. They know I hit 2 of them. They'll move on to easier targets." He handed her a piece of hardtack and some dried apples. "It's not much of a breakfast. It's more than enough." Lillian ate quickly, finding herself hungrier than expected. "Mr. Party," she corrected herself, "may I ask why you're helping me? Surely escorting a stranded schoolteacher isn't as profitable as bounty hunting." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Maybe I've got a soft spot for schoolteachers." "Is that so?" "No," he chuckled. "But leaving you stranded in these mountains wouldn't sit right. Besides, I was heading to Animas Forks anyway." They set out as the morning mist still clung to the mountains. Tyler's horse seemed unbothered by the double burden, picking its way confidently along trails that sometimes disappeared altogether, at least to Lillian's untrained eye. The closeness of their position, her back against his chest, his arms around her to hold the reins, should have scandalized her. Instead, she found it reassuring, especially when the trail edged along precipitous drops. "Have you always lived in these mountains?" she asked, partly to distract herself from the dizzying heights. "Born in Missouri," he replied. "Came west during the war, never found a reason to leave." "The Civil War." She tried to calculate his age, perhaps mid-30s, though the outdoor life made it hard to tell. Wasn't much civil about it, but yes. His tone discouraged further questions on that topic. "And what brings you to Animas Forks now?" There was a pause before he answered. "Business." The brevity of his response suggested he wasn't inclined to elaborate, and Lillian didn't press. They rode in companionable silence, the rhythm of the horse's hoofbeats and the creaking of leather creating a soothing cadence. The mountain landscape unfolded around them in breathtaking grandeur, sweeping vistas of forested slopes, wildflower-dotted meadows, and in the distance, snow-capped peaks that seemed to touch the vast Colorado sky. By midday, they stopped in a small clearing beside a stream to rest the horse. Tyler helped Lillian dismount, his hands strong at her waist. Her legs trembled, unaccustomed to long hours in the saddle. "You're holding up well," he observed, watching as she attempted to smooth her hopelessly wrinkled dress. "Most city folk would be complaining by now." "I save my complaints for situations I can change," she replied, moving to the stream to splash cool water on her face. The cold shock was refreshing, washing away some of the dust and fatigue of the journey. When she turned back, she caught Tyler watching her with an unreadable expression. He quickly looked away, busying himself with checking his horse's hooves. "May I ask about your teaching position?" he said after a moment. "Animas Forks isn't exactly Boston." Lillian smiled, grateful for the neutral topic. The advertisement promised an opportunity to shape young minds in a growing frontier community. "The pay is modest, but it includes accommodations in the schoolhouse. I'm to teach 15 children ranging from 6 to 16 years of age." That's a wide range. Hence why they needed someone with experience. She seated herself on a sun-warmed rock. I taught for 3 years at a girls' academy in Boston, and yet you left for the wilderness. It wasn't a question, but curiosity tinged his voice. Lillian hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal to this man who remained largely a mystery himself. Let's just say Boston holds memories I preferred to leave behind. Tyler nodded, not pushing for more. The town will welcome you. They've been without a teacher since Miss Holloway left last winter. Left. A faint smile curved his lips. Married a silver miner and moved to Leadville. Happens often enough out here. Women are scarce and men get lonely. Well, they needn't worry about that with me, Lillian said firmly. I came west to teach, not to find a husband. Tyler raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. After refilling their canteens, they resumed their journey, the trail gradually descending as they moved through a series of valleys. The terrain grew less rugged, though no less beautiful, with stands of aspen breaking up the dark pine forests. By late afternoon they crested a ridge, and Tyler drew the horse to a halt. There it is, he said, pointing to a cluster of buildings nestled in a valley below. Animas Forks. Lillian leaned forward, taking in her first glimpse of her new home. The town was smaller than she'd imagined, perhaps 30 buildings arranged along a main street, with smaller structures scattered up the hillsides. A church steeple rose prominently in the center, and she could make out the larger forms of what must be mining operations on the outskirts. It's beautiful, she breathed, genuinely moved by the picturesque setting. It's rough, Tyler corrected, though not unkindly. Winters are hard, the men harder. Silver mines draw a certain type. He paused. But there are good people too, families trying to build something lasting. As they descended toward the town, Lillian felt a curious mixture of anticipation and regret. The journey, despite its dramatic beginning, had awakened something in her, a sense of freedom and possibility that had been missing in her carefully ordered Boston life. And despite his reticence, she had grown comfortable in Tyler's company, finding in his quiet strength a reassurance she hadn't known she needed. "What will you do after you've delivered me safely?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. "Told you I have business here," he replied. After that, he shrugged, the movement shifting his chest against her back. The mountains always need tending. They entered Animas Forks as the sun was setting, casting the buildings in gold and shadow. Their arrival drew curious glances, particularly the sight of a well-dressed woman, albeit dusty and disheveled, riding double with a man known to many of the townspeople. Tyler guided his horse directly to a 2-story building with a sign proclaiming it the Silver Crown Hotel and Saloon. He dismounted first, then reached up to help Lillian down. Her legs nearly buckled from the unaccustomed hours in the saddle, and his hands lingered at her waist until she steadied herself. "Best place to get you situated," he explained, tying his horse to the hitching post. "The proprietor, Mrs. Caldwell, can help you get settled." The interior of the Silver Crown was unexpectedly refined, with polished wood floors and actual glass windows, clear signs of prosperity in a mining town. A few early evening patrons sat at tables, conversations faltering as Lillian entered with Tyler close behind her. A plump woman with graying hair swept forward, her face a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Tyler Parsons, as I live and breathe," she exclaimed. "And who might this be?" "Margaret," Tyler nodded respectfully. "This is Miss Lillian Evans, the new schoolteacher. Her stagecoach was attacked in Byers Pass yesterday. The driver, Jim Hollister, didn't make it." Margaret Caldwell's hand flew to her mouth. "Lord have mercy, Jim had a family in Denver." She turned sympathetic eyes to Lillian. "You poor dear, what an ordeal. Come, sit down before you fall down." Lillian was ushered to a table, and within minutes a bowl of stew and fresh bread appeared before her. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first savory bite touched her tongue. Tyler settled across from her, accepting a mug of coffee from Mrs. Caldwell. "I'll need to inform the marshal," he said. "Those bandits are still out there." "Marshal Bradley's out of town until tomorrow," Margaret informed him, "escorting a prisoner to Durango." She turned to Lillian. "Now about your accommodations, my dear. The schoolhouse has living quarters, but they've been empty for months. Probably needs a good airing out. You're welcome to stay here until it's proper." "That's very kind," Lillian began, but was interrupted by the saloon doors swinging open. A tall man with a shock of silver-streaked dark hair strode in, his eyes immediately finding Tyler. "Thought that was your horse outside, Parsons," he said, his tone neither friendly nor hostile, merely wary. Tyler's posture stiffened slightly. "Thornton, you're back sooner than expected." The newcomer's gaze shifted to Lillian, and he removed his hat in a gesture of respect. "Madam, Louis Thornton, meet Miss Lillian Evans," Margaret interjected smoothly. "Our new schoolteacher. She had quite the ordeal Stagecoach ambushed in Byers Pass, if Tyler hadn't happened along." She let the implication hang in the air. Thornton's expression changed, genuine concern replacing suspicion. "My condolences for your troubles, Miss Evans. Animas Forks is usually more welcoming." "I'm just grateful Mr. Parsons was there," Lillian replied, noting the tension between the two men with curiosity. "Yes, our Tyler has a knack for being in the right place at the right time," Thornton said, with a meaningful look at the bounty hunter. "Margaret, I'll take supper in my usual spot." As he moved away, Lillian raised an eyebrow at Tyler. "Friend of yours, Louis Thornton owns the largest silver mine in the area," he replied evenly. "We have history." Before she could inquire further, the door opened again, admitting a slender man with wire-rimmed spectacles who made directly for their table. "Miss Evans?" he inquired, looking both relieved and flustered. "I'm Herbert Wheeler, chairman of the town council. We received word from Silverton that you departed, but when you didn't arrive yesterday." He shook his head. "And now to hear about an ambush. Dreadful, simply dreadful." Lillian rose to shake his hand. "Mr. Wheeler, a pleasure despite the circumstances. I apologize for any worry I may have caused." No, the fault is entirely ours for not arranging better protection." Wheeler glanced at Tyler with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. "Though it seems Providence intervened. Thank you, Parsons." Tyler merely nodded, draining his coffee. "If you're finished eating, Miss Evans, I'd be happy to show you to the schoolhouse," Wheeler offered. "It's not far, and though modest, I think you'll find it comfortable." Lillian hesitated, suddenly reluctant to end her time with Tyler. Over the past 24 hours, this taciturn man with his quiet competence had become her anchor in a strange land. Yet she knew it was time to begin the life she had come west to build. "That would be lovely, thank you." She turned to Tyler, finding it oddly difficult to meet his gaze. "Mr. Parsons, I can never adequately thank you for what you've done." He rose, towering over both her and Wheeler. "No thanks needed, Miss Evans. Just doing what needed doing." His voice was gruff, but something in his eyes, a softness, perhaps belied his casual dismissal. "Nevertheless, I am in your debt." On impulse, she extended her hand. Tyler took it, his calloused palm warm against hers. "Get some rest, schoolteacher. Animas Forks will seem brighter in the morning." With that, he released her hand, nodded to Wheeler, and strode toward the bar. Lillian watched him go, feeling oddly bereft, before following Wheeler out into the gathering dusk. The schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a simple but sturdy one-room building with an adjoining living space. As Wheeler had promised, it was modest, a single bedroom, a small kitchen, and a sitting area, but after her journey, it seemed a veritable palace. The town council had even arranged for basic provisions and a small stack of firewood. "Classes begin Monday," Wheeler informed her as he lit lamps around the room. "That gives you 3 days to settle in. The children are eager to meet you." "And I them," Lillian replied, genuinely looking forward to resuming her vocation. After Wheeler departed with promises to send the ladies' auxiliary to call on her the next day, Lillian explored her new home. The schoolroom was well equipped with books, slates, and a large blackboard. Her living quarters, while plain, held potential for comfort with a few personal touches that now lay abandoned in her luggage on a mountain pass. That sobering thought reminded her of how drastically her circumstances had changed in just 24 hours. She had arrived in Colorado with carefully laid plans, only to find herself dependent on the kindness of strangers in a town where she knew no one. Except Tyler Parsons, she thought, recalling the steady blue eyes that had watched over her since the ambush. Exhaustion finally overcame her, and Lillian fell asleep atop the quilt on her narrow bed, still wearing her travel-worn dress, dreaming of bandits and mountains and a man with a rifle who materialized from nowhere when she needed him most. The next morning brought sunshine streaming through uncurtained windows and a knock at her door. Lillian hastily smoothed her hair and straightened her rumpled clothing before answering. A young woman with a friendly, freckled face stood on the step, arms laden with parcels. "Miss Evans." "I'm Sarah Jennings from the Mercantile. Mr. Wheeler asked us to bring over some essentials, seeing as how you lost your belongings." She bustled in without waiting for an invitation. "My goodness, they haven't done much to spruce this place up, have they? Men never think of the niceties." Before Lillian could respond, Sarah was unpacking her bundles: a simple dress, undergarments, a hairbrush, soap, and various toiletries. "It's not much, and probably not what you're used to, but it'll tide you over until you can order proper things from Denver." Lillian felt tears spring to her eyes at the thoughtfulness. "This is incredibly kind. I insist on paying." Sarah waved away her protest. "Father says to put it on account. You can settle up when you've got your first month's salary." She paused, eyeing Lillian with frank curiosity. "Is it true Tyler Parsons rescued you from bandits?" "He did," Lillian confirmed, taking the dress to examine it. The fabric was sturdy cotton, the style simple but practical. "I owe him my life." "My stars," Sarah breathed. "Half the women in town would give their eye-teeth to be rescued by that man. There's something about those quiet, dangerous types." "He seemed more concerned with efficiency than romance," Lillian observed dryly, though she recalled the solid warmth of him behind her on the horse. Sarah laughed. "That sounds like Tyler. He doesn't come to town often, and when he does, he keeps to himself. Some say he was a Confederate officer, others that he rode with Quantrill's raiders. My father thinks he was a Union scout. He mentioned serving in the war, but didn't elaborate." "That's Tyler all over, a man of few words and many secrets." Sarah moved to the window, peering out. "Speaking of which, he's headed this way right now." Lillian's heart gave an unexpected leap. She moved to join Sarah at the window and saw Tyler approaching on foot, leading his horse. He'd shaved and changed clothes. She noted still trail-worn but neater than before. "I should go," Sarah said with a knowing smile. "Father needs help with inventory, but the ladies' auxiliary will call this afternoon, and I'll be back tomorrow to show you around town." As Sarah slipped out the door, Tyler reached the schoolhouse steps. The two exchanged brief greetings before Tyler continued to Lillian's door, removing his hat as he approached. "Miss Evans," he said, his deep voice sending an inexplicable tremor through her. "I hope I'm not intruding." Not at all, she replied, suddenly acutely aware of her disheveled appearance. Please come in. He stepped inside, his tall frame seeming to fill the small space. His eyes took in the room, noting the parcels from Sarah's visit. I see the town's looking after you. Everyone has been remarkably kind. She gestured to a chair. Would you like to sit? I'm afraid I can't offer coffee yet. He shook his head. I can't stay long, just wanted to make sure you're settling in. He paused, then reached into his vest pocket. And to return this. He held out a small object that caught the morning light, her mother's cameo brooch. Lillian gasped, taking it with trembling fingers. How did you rode back to the ambush site at dawn? He explained. Checked what was left of your luggage. Most had been ransacked, but I found this caught in a tear in your trunk. His expression softened at her evident emotion. Figured it might be important. Lillian clutched the cameo, the last memento of her mother, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. It was my mother's. I thought it lost forever. She looked up at him, not bothering to hide her tears. I don't know how to thank you. Your face just did. Something in his voice made her breath catch. You went all that way, risking another encounter with those men for this, he shrugged, looking slightly uncomfortable with her gratitude. Wasn't much risk. They're long gone. Besides, he added with the ghost of a smile, I had other business back that way. Your bounty hunting, something like that. He shifted, glancing toward the door. Marshal Bradley's back. I've given him a full account. He'll want to speak with you when you're ready. Lillian nodded, still clutching the cameo. Of course. I'll go to his office this afternoon. An awkward silence fell between them. There was so much Lillian wanted to ask about his past, about his business in Animas Forks, about the obvious tension with Lewis Thornton. Yet she sensed his reticence, the careful boundaries he maintained. Well, he finally said, replacing his hat, I should let you get settled. Will you be staying in town long? The question slipped out before she could reconsider. Tyler's expression was unreadable. A while. Got some matters to attend to. Then perhaps I'll see you around town, she offered, hating how hopeful she sounded. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It's a small town, Miss Evans. I expect our paths will cross. With a tip of his hat, he was gone, leaving Lillian standing in her doorway, the cameo warm in her palm, watching his tall figure stride back toward the center of town. The next few days passed in a flurry of activity as Lillian prepared for her first day of teaching. The ladies' auxiliary, led by Margaret Caldwell, descended on the schoolhouse armed with cleaning supplies, curtain material, and enough food to feed a small army. By Sunday evening, the schoolroom gleamed with polish, cheerful calico curtains hung at the windows, and Lillian's sparse living quarters had been transformed with handmade quilts, braided rugs, and even a vase of wildflowers. Lillian threw herself into preparations, organizing lesson plans, and learning the names of her prospective students from their mothers. The work was a welcome distraction from thoughts of Tyler Parsons, whom she had glimpsed only once since his visit riding out of town with Marshal Bradley, presumably on the trail of the bandits who had attacked her stagecoach. Monday morning dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for her first day of teaching. Lillian dressed carefully in her new dress. Sarah had added a white collar and cuffs to make it more suitable for a schoolteacher, and pinned her mother's cameo at her throat. As she rang the school bell, children began appearing, some eager, some reluctant, all curious about the new teacher from Boston. By mid-afternoon, Lillian felt cautiously optimistic about her new position. Her students, while diverse in age and background, showed genuine interest in learning. Little Emma Wilson had presented her with a somewhat crushed bouquet of wildflowers, and even sullen, 16-year-old James Thornton, who she discovered was Lewis Thornton's son, had grudgingly participated in the geography lesson. As the children filed out at day's end, Lillian noticed a familiar figure leaning against a pine tree across from the schoolhouse. Her heart gave a peculiar flutter as Tyler straightened and crossed the yard. "Mr. Parsons," she greeted him, aware of the curious glances from departing students. "This is a pleasant surprise. Figured I'd see how your first day went," he replied, hands resting easily on his gun belt. "Heard you rang the bell right on time this morning." Lillian smiled. "News travels fast in Animas Forks. Not much happens here that everybody doesn't know about by sundown." He fell into step beside her as she walked toward her quarters. "Any trouble with the students?" "Nothing unmanageable, though I suspect James Thornton may prove challenging." Tyler's expression darkened slightly. "Lewis Thornton's boy has his father's stubborn streak." "You seem to know the Thorntons well," she observed, probing gently. He was silent for a moment. "Lewis and I have history, not all of it pleasant." Before she could inquire further, they reached her door. Tyler removed his hat, a gesture that somehow seemed more personal than merely polite. "I wanted to let you know Marshal Bradley and I tracked those bandits to the Utah Territory line. They won't be troubling this area again." Relief washed over her. "Thank you for telling me. I've been uneasy thinking they might return." "No need for unease on that account." His blue eyes held hers. "You're safe here, Miss Evans." The simple statement, delivered with quiet certainty, loosened a knot of tension she hadn't fully acknowledged. "I believe I am," she replied softly. A moment stretched between them, laden with unspoken words. Then Tyler cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "I should let you rest. Teaching 15 children can't be easy." "Will I see you again soon?" Lillian asked, again surprising herself with her forthrightness. A hint of a smile curved his lips. "Count on it, schoolteacher." As the days turned into weeks, Lillian settled into the rhythm of life in Animas Forks. Her students progressed in their studies. The town accepted her as one of their own, and she found unexpected joy in the simplicity of mountain living. True to his word, Tyler Parsons became a regular, if unpredictable, presence in her life, sometimes appearing at her door with fresh trout for her supper, other times materializing on the schoolhouse steps, just as she dismissed her students for the day. They never spoke of his past or his mysterious business in town, though Lillian pieced together fragments from comments by townspeople. Tyler had indeed fought in the Civil War, though opinions varied on which side. He had come west immediately after, working as a scout, a marshal in several mining camps, and eventually settling into his current solitary existence in the mountains. He was respected, even feared by some, but few could claim to know him well, except, increasingly, Lillian. Their conversations, initially stilted, grew more comfortable with time. She told him of her life in Boston, of teaching at the girls' academy, of her parents' deaths, her father from influenza, her mother from what the doctors called a decline, but what Lillian recognized as a broken heart. She even, haltingly, spoke of Charles Blackwell, the man whose betrayal had ultimately driven her west. "He was engaged to my cousin," she explained one evening as they sat on the schoolhouse steps, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. "I didn't know no one did when he began courting me as well. When the truth came out, I was the one blamed, despite his deception." She sighed. Boston society has little forgiveness for a woman seen as a rival, even an unwitting one. Tyler's jaw tightened. "Man sounds like a coward." "He was," Lillian agreed, "but in a way I'm grateful. If not for that scandal, I might never have considered coming west." She glanced at Tyler's profile, strong and steady in the fading light. "I might never have found this place, these people." Her voice softened. "You." Tyler turned to her, something in his eyes that made her breath catch. For a moment she thought he might reach for her. Instead, he rose abruptly. "It's getting dark. I should see you home. Lillian bit back disappointment. Tyler, we're sitting on my doorstep. He blinked, then gave a rueful chuckle. So we are. He offered a hand to help her up, his calloused palm warm against hers. I'll bid you good night then. As he turned to leave, Lillian found herself calling after him. The harvest social is Saturday. Will you attend? He paused, looking back. Not much for social gatherings. I thought you might make an exception. She lifted her chin. I find I would enjoy your company. Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps, or pleasure. In that case, Miss Evans, I'll see you Saturday. Saturday evening found the town hall transformed with autumn decorations, dried corn stalks, pumpkins, and paper lanterns casting a warm glow over the proceedings. Nearly everyone in Animas Forks had turned out, from the miners in their Sunday best to the town's few professional men with their wives. A small band played lively tunes, and tables groaned with potluck offerings. Lillian, wearing a new dress of deep blue calico that Sarah had helped her make, greeted parents and students with genuine pleasure. Yet she couldn't help glancing repeatedly toward the door, watching for Tyler's tall figure. He'll come, Sarah whispered, following her gaze. Half the town's talking about how he's sweet on the new schoolteacher. Lillian felt heat rise to her cheeks. Don't be ridiculous. We're friends, nothing more. Sarah raised a knowing eyebrow but was prevented from responding by the arrival of Louis Thornton and his son James. The mine owner wore an expensive suit that spoke of Eastern tailoring, his silver-streaked hair neatly combed. He approached Lillian with a courtly bow. Miss Evans, you look lovely this evening. I trust you're enjoying our little celebration. Very much, Mr. Thornton. James has been a most attentive guide. She smiled at her student, who actually returned the gesture progress from his initial surliness. James speaks highly of your teaching, Thornton said, surprising both Lillian and the boy himself. I understand you've introduced poetry alongside the practical subjects. I believe imagination is as essential as arithmetic, Lillian replied. Your son has shown particular aptitude for Wordsworth. Thornton's smile grew more genuine. His mother loved poetry. I'm pleased to see that appreciation lives on. He glanced around the room. I understand Parsons may attend tonight, an unusual occurrence. The subtle emphasis on Tyler's name piqued Lillian's curiosity anew. You've known Mr. Parsons long, since '65, Thornton confirmed. Just after the war, we were both different men then. His expression grew distant. He hasn't told you how we know each other, no, Lillian admitted. He's rather reticent about his past. Thornton's gaze sharpened. Perhaps you should ask him sometime. It's an illuminating story. Before she could respond, he nodded politely. If you'll excuse me, I see Judge Wheeler waving me over. James, mind your manners with your teacher. As Thornton moved away, Lillian felt a presence at her side and turned to find Tyler standing there, hat in hand. The sight of him freshly shaven, wearing a clean shirt and vest that, while far from fancy, represented clear effort, sent a flutter through her chest. You came, she said, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. Said I would. His eyes took in her appearance, lingering on the cameo at her throat. You look beautiful, Lillian. It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent warmth spreading through her. Thank you. You look quite handsome yourself. A hint of color touched his cheeks. Cleaned up as best I could. The band struck up a lively reel and couples began forming sets for dancing. Tyler glanced at the dancers, then back to Lillian. I'm not much of a dancer, he warned. Neither am I, she confessed, but I'd like to try if you're willing. To her surprise, he offered his arm. For you, I'll risk making a fool of myself. They joined the set, Tyler moving with unexpected grace for a man so large. His hand on her waist was tentative at first, then firmer as they navigated the steps together. Lillian found herself laughing as he twirled her, caught up in the music and the sheer joy of the moment. "You lied," she accused playfully as the dance ended. "You dance quite well." A real smile, rare and transformative, lit his face. "Had a good partner." They danced twice more before retreating to the refreshment table for punch. Lillian was acutely aware of the glances and whispers their pairing had generated, but found she didn't care. For the first time since arriving in Animas Forks, she felt truly at home, and Tyler's presence beside her was a large part of that feeling. As the evening progressed, Tyler gradually relaxed, even engaging in conversation with some of the townspeople. Lillian watched with pleasure as he stooped to speak seriously with little Emma Wilson about her pet rabbit, and later shared what appeared to be a fishing story with Herbert Wheeler, complete with expansive hand gestures. "He's different with you," Margaret Caldwell observed, joining Lillian as she watched Tyler help an elderly miner navigate the crowded room. "Never seen him so at ease." "We've become friends," Lillian said, though the words seemed inadequate for the connection she felt with him. Margaret's knowing eyes assessed her. "Friends, is it? Well, friendship's a fine foundation for more." She patted Lillian's hand. "Just be careful, dear. Tyler Parsons carries burdens heavier than most." Before Lillian could inquire further, Lewis Thornton approached the small stage where the musicians played, raising his hands for attention. The room gradually quieted. "Friends and neighbors," he began, his voice carrying easily, "as many of you know, today marks exactly 15 years since silver was discovered in these mountains, leading to the founding of our town. What began as a simple mining camp has grown into a community we can all be proud of." Appreciative murmurs followed this statement. "To commemorate this occasion," Thornton continued, "I'm pleased to announce that Thornton Mining will be expanding operations, opening a new shaft that promises to be the richest vein yet discovered in this region. This means more jobs, more prosperity, and a brighter future for Animas Forks." Cheers erupted, miners raising their cups in celebration. Lillian glanced at Tyler, surprised to find his expression had hardened, his earlier relaxation vanishing. "Additionally," Thornton raised his voice over the crowd, "I'm donating funds to build a proper school building with multiple classrooms to accommodate our growing population. Our children deserve the best education possible, and our new teacher, Miss Evans, deserves proper facilities." All eyes turned to Lillian, who stood frozen in surprise as applause broke out around her. Tyler's hand found hers, squeezing gently before releasing it. "That's generous," she whispered, confused by his obvious tension. "Lewis Thornton never does anything without a reason," he replied, his voice so low only she could hear. The celebration continued, but Tyler remained withdrawn, his earlier openness replaced by watchful vigilance. When Thornton approached them directly, Lillian felt Tyler stiffen beside her. "Miss Evans, I hope you approve of my little surprise," Thornton said with a benevolent smile. "I've had plans drawn up for a modern schoolhouse, 2 classrooms, a library, and expanded living quarters for the teacher." "It's most generous," Lillian replied, genuinely appreciative despite Tyler's apparent suspicion. "The children will benefit enormously." "My thoughts exactly." Thornton's gaze shifted to Tyler. "Parsons, I'm surprised to see you joining in our festivities." "Not usually one for public gatherings, are you? Special occasion," Tyler replied neutrally. "Indeed." Thornton's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Evans must be a remarkable influence. I don't recall seeing you this sociable since our days in Virginia." Tyler's jaw tightened. "Ancient history, Lewis. Is it?" Thornton raised an eyebrow. "I sometimes wonder." He turned back to Lillian with renewed warmth. I hope you'll review the school plans this week. I value your professional opinion. After Thornton moved away, Lillian turned questioning eyes to Tyler. Virginia. You never mentioned living there. There's a lot I haven't mentioned, he replied, his expression closed. Some things are better left in the past. The evening's warmth had evaporated, leaving a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. Sensing his withdrawal, Lillian touched his arm gently. Would you walk me home? I find I'm rather tired. Relief flashed across his features. Gladly. Outside, the night was crisp and clear, stars blazing overhead with an intensity never seen in Boston skies. They walked in silence until the schoolhouse came into view, golden lamplight spilling from the windows where Lillian had left a lamp burning. I'm sorry, Tyler said abruptly. Didn't mean to spoil your evening. You didn't, she assured him. I had a wonderful time. But I can see that Mr. Thornton's presence disturbs you. Tyler stopped, gazing up at the stars for a long moment before speaking. Lewis Thornton and I served together, Confederate cavalry under General Stuart. The admission startled her. You were in the Confederate Army. Missouri was divided. My family sided with the South. His voice was flat, emotionless. After Gettysburg, I started questioning what we were fighting for. By the time Lee surrendered, I'd seen enough killing to last several lifetimes. Lillian remained silent, sensing he needed to continue at his own pace. Lewis and I came west together after the war. We were like brothers then. A muscle worked in his jaw. Started a mining venture together in Nevada, found silver, then. He trailed off, his eyes distant. Things went wrong. People died who shouldn't have. What happened? Lillian asked softly. Tyler's gaze returned to her, and the pain she saw there made her breath catch. That's a story for another time. Just know that Lewis Thornton isn't the benevolent town patron he appears to be. They had reached her door, and Lillian turned to face him fully. Tyler, whatever happened in the past, I trust you. I've trusted you since the moment you opened that stagecoach door. Something in his expression shifted, softened. He reached out slowly, as if giving her time to withdraw, and traced the curve of her cheek with calloused fingers. You shouldn't, he murmured. I'm not the hero you think I am. I never asked for a hero, she replied, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. Just a man who speaks the truth as he sees it. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her lower lip with exquisite gentleness. Lillian leaned into his touch, her eyes holding his in silent permission. The kiss, when it came, was tentative at first, a question rather than a demand. Then, as she responded, it deepened into something that made her knees weaken and her heart soar. His arms encircled her, strong and sure, and she pressed closer, savoring the solid warmth of him. When they finally parted, both breathless, Tyler rested his forehead against hers. Been wanting to do that since I found you in that stagecoach, he confessed. Lillian smiled, feeling a joy that bordered on giddiness. I wish you hadn't waited so long. He chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest against her palms. Proper Boston ladies don't kiss strange men they meet on mountain passes. Perhaps they should, she replied impishly. It seems to have worked out rather well for this one. His expression grew serious. Lillian, there's more to my history with Thornton, things you should know before. She placed a finger over his lips. Tomorrow, tell me tomorrow. Tonight I just want to remember the dancing and the stars and this. Tyler nodded, pressing one more gentle kiss to her lips before releasing her. Tomorrow, then. Rest well, schoolteacher. Lillian watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the star-strewn sky, feeling as though her life in Animas Forks had truly begun at last. Tomorrow, however, brought unexpected complications. Lillian had barely rung the morning bell when Marshal Bradley appeared at the schoolhouse door, his expression grim. "Miss Evans, I apologize for the interruption, but I need to speak with you immediately," he said, hat in hand. "It's about Tyler Parsons." A cold dread settled in Lillian's stomach. "Children, please review your spelling lists quietly," she instructed before stepping outside with the marshal. "What's happened? Is he hurt?" "No, madam, but he's in my jail." Bradley's weathered face showed genuine regret. "There was an incident at Thornton's mine this morning. Accusations of claim jumping and sabotage. Tyler's been arrested." "That's absurd," Lillian protested. "Tyler would never, Miss Evans," Bradley cut in gently. "There's history here you might not be aware of. Tyler and Lewis Thornton have bad blood going back years. This new mine Thornton's opening, it's on land Tyler believes was stolen from him." Lillian's mind raced, recalling Tyler's cryptic comments about his past with Thornton. "I need to see him." "That's why I'm here. He's asking for you." Bradley hesitated. "But you should know things look bad." "Thornton's got witnesses who say they saw Tyler planting explosives near the new shaft. If convicted, he's facing serious prison time." Arranging for Margaret Caldwell to supervise her class, Lillian hurried to the small jailhouse at the edge of town. Inside, she found Tyler pacing his cell like a caged mountain lion, his expression darkening further when he saw her. "You shouldn't have come," he said, gripping the bars separating them. "Did you truly believe I wouldn't?" She moved closer, her eyes searching his. "Tell me what happened." Tyler's knuckles whitened on the iron bars. "It's a setup. I was tracking a mountain lion that's been killing livestock near my cabin, had been since dawn. Came into town for supplies and found myself surrounded by Thornton's men, the marshal, and a crowd of witnesses claiming they saw me at the mine. Why would Thornton do this?" A bitter smile twisted his lips. "Remember that story I promised to tell you, about what happened between us?" At her nod, he continued, "We discovered silver together in Nevada, formed a partnership. The claim was richer than anything in these parts. Then Lewis got greedy, wanted it all." Tyler's voice dropped, forcing Lillian to lean closer. "There was a cave-in. 3 men died, including my younger brother, Nathan. Investigation called it an accident, but I knew better. Lewis had ordered support beams removed to extract ore faster." His eyes darkened with old pain. "When I confronted him, he had me beaten nearly to death and left for dead in the desert. By the time I recovered, he'd sold the claim and disappeared. And now he's here in Animas Forks," Lillian murmured, the pieces falling into place. "Been tracking him for years. Finally found him 6 months ago. Bought land adjoining his new claim, watched, gathered evidence of his past crimes." Tyler's jaw clenched. "Yesterday, I sent a telegram to the federal marshal in Denver. Lewis must have been tipped off. This arrest is his way of discrediting me before the authorities arrive." Lillian's mind raced. The timing of his announcement about the new school, it was a distraction. Tyler nodded grimly. "And a way to ingratiate himself with the townspeople, including you. Lewis Thornton always thinks 3 steps ahead." "We need to prove your innocence," Lillian said firmly. "You said you were tracking a mountain lion. Surely there's evidence of that." "My rifle's still up on the north ridge where I was tracking, and I spoke with old Sam Jenkins at dawn when I crossed his property." Tyler's expression lightened fractionally. "You believe me then?" "Without question." Lillian reached through the bars to touch his face. "Of course I do." Their fingers entwined through the iron bars, and for a moment neither spoke. Then Tyler straightened, purpose returning to his stance. "Bradley's a fair man, but he won't go against Thornton without solid evidence. The town depends on the mine for survival." "Then I'll find your rifle and bring Sam Jenkins to testify," Lillian declared. Tyler's eyes widened. Lillian, no. The North Ridge is dangerous terrain and Thornton's men will be watching. Let Bradley handle the investigation. The same Bradley who arrested you on Thornton's word. She shook her head. I may be a schoolteacher, but I'm not helpless. You saved my life once, now it's my turn. Before Tyler could protest further, she squeezed his hand and turned to leave. I'll be back before nightfall with proof. The next hours tested Lillian's resolve like nothing in her life before. Borrowing a horse from Sarah's father and claiming a need to collect plant specimens for a school project, she rode toward the North Ridge. The terrain grew increasingly rugged, forcing her to dismount and lead the horse through narrow passes where the trail nearly disappeared. By mid-afternoon, she had found Sam Jenkins, a grizzled prospector who readily confirmed seeing Tyler at dawn. Better still, he agreed to accompany her to town to provide testimony. Their next task, locating Tyler's abandoned rifle, proved more challenging. The ridge covered miles of rocky terrain, and Lillian had only Tyler's vague description to guide her. As the shadows lengthened, Lillian's determination began to waver. She and Jenkins had searched for hours with no success. Then, just as she was preparing to admit defeat, a flash of metal caught her eye from a rocky outcropping, the barrel of a rifle, propped against a boulder exactly as Tyler had described. "Mr. Jenkins, over here," she called, scrambling toward the weapon. As she reached for the rifle, a voice from behind startled her. "That's far enough, Miss Evans." Lillian whirled to find James Thornton standing a few yards away, his young face tight with conflicting emotions. "James, what are you doing here?" "Following you," he admitted. Father suspected Parsons might have allies in town. His hand moved to the pistol at his belt. "He sent me to make sure no one interfered with the evidence." "Evidence that was planted," Lillian countered, her teacher's instincts taking over despite the danger. "James, listen to me. Your father is framing an innocent man." "You don't know anything about it," the boy retorted, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "I know that Tyler Parsons was tracking a mountain lion this morning, not sabotaging the mine. This rifle proves it." She gestured toward the weapon. "And I know that people rarely change their fundamental nature. If your father wronged Tyler in the past, what makes you certain he's in the right now?" James's hand wavered on his pistol. "Father said Parsons is dangerous, obsessed with revenge for imagined wrongs. And yet, when I first met Tyler, he was risking his life to save a stranger from bandits." Lillian took a careful step toward her student. "James, I've taught you to examine evidence and think critically. Look at the facts here. Why would Tyler sabotage the mine on the very day federal marshals were due to arrive? Why would he leave his rifle here if he was planting explosives miles away?" The conflict on the boy's face intensified. Behind him, Sam Jenkins had circled around, ready to intervene if necessary. But Lillian kept her focus on James, sensing the boy's inner struggle. "Your mother loved poetry," she said softly, recalling Thornton's comment at the social. "She valued truth and beauty. What would she want you to do now?" Something broke in James's expression. His hand fell away from his weapon. "She would want me to do what's right," he whispered, "even if it meant going against Father." Relief washed over Lillian. "Then help us, James. Help us save an innocent man." The boy hesitated only a moment longer before nodding. "I'll do more than that. I'll testify." By the time they reached Animas Forks, dusk was settling over the mountains. A crowd had gathered outside the jailhouse, voices raised in argument. Marshal Bradley stood on the steps, trying to maintain order as Lewis Thornton demanded immediate action. "The evidence is clear," Thornton was saying. "Parsons has threatened me repeatedly. He should be transferred to Denver immediately for trial." "Father," James's voice cut through the crowd as he dismounted from his horse. The assembled townspeople parted as the boy strode forward, Lillian and Sam Jenkins close behind. Thornton's face registered shock, then anger. "James, what are you doing with them?" "Telling the truth," the boy replied, his voice steadier than Lillian had ever heard it. "I heard you, Father. Last night, talking to Mr. Simmons about planting the explosives yourselves, about framing Parsons before the federal marshals arrived." A murmur ran through the crowd. Thornton's face darkened with fury. "You're confused, boy." "Whatever you think you heard, I'm not confused," James interrupted. "You said make sure it looks convincing. Parsons has friends in Denver, but a sabotage charge will discredit him completely. Those were your exact words." Bradley stepped forward, his expression grave. "Is this true, James?" "You'd swear to this in court," the boy nodded firmly. "Yes, sir, and there's more. Last month I found old papers in Father's study documents about a mining claim in Nevada. Partnership papers with Tyler Parsons' name on them, and a report about a cave in that killed 3 men. Lillian moved to James's side, placing a supportive hand on his shoulder as she addressed the marshal. "We've also brought evidence that Mr. Parsons was nowhere near the mine this morning." She gestured to Jenkins and the rifle they'd recovered. "He was tracking a mountain lion on the North Ridge, just as he claimed." Thornton's composure cracked. His hand moved toward his coat and Lillian tensed, fearing a hidden weapon. Instead, he lunged toward his son. "You ungrateful," Bradley and 2 townsmen intercepted him before he could reach James. "That's enough, Lewis," the marshal said firmly. "I think it's time you and I had a serious conversation." He glanced at his deputy. "Get Parsons out of that cell and send someone for Judge Wheeler." The crowd parted as the deputy emerged with Tyler, who immediately sought Lillian with his gaze. The relief in his eyes when he saw her standing safe beside James was palpable. He crossed to them in long strides. "You actually did it," he said, wonder in his voice as he looked from Lillian to the rifle in Jenkins's hands. "You found the evidence." "She did more than that," James interjected. "She made me see the truth about my father." The boy's voice caught. "I'm sorry, Mr. Parsons, about your brother." "About everything." Tyler's expression softened as he regarded the boy. After a moment, he extended his hand. "You've got courage, James, more than most grown men I know." As James tentatively shook Tyler's hand, Lillian felt something shift in the atmosphere, not just between these two, but throughout the watching crowd. The truth, finally emerging after years of buried secrets, was having its effect. Marshal Bradley approached, leading a subdued Thornton in handcuffs. "Tyler, I owe you an apology. Should have looked deeper before making that arrest." Tyler nodded acknowledgement. "You were doing your job, Hank." "Well, my job now is to hold Thornton until those federal marshals arrive." "They're due on tomorrow's stage." Bradley glanced at James. "Boy's testimony changes everything, combined with whatever evidence you've gathered." "It should be enough," Tyler confirmed. "After 15 years, it should finally be enough." As Bradley led Thornton away, the crowd began to disperse, voices buzzing with the dramatic events. Tyler turned to Lillian, his eyes searching her face. "You rode into those mountains alone, risked yourself for me." "Why?" "Not alone," she corrected, gesturing to Jenkins. "And as for why," she smiled up at him. "Because I believe in you, Tyler Parsons, because what's between us is worth fighting for." His expression softened, and he reached for her hand, seemingly oblivious to the remaining onlookers. "Been fighting a long time. Never thought I'd find something worth more than vengeance." His fingers tightened around hers. "Someone worth more." Lillian's heart swelled. "Does this mean you'll be staying in Animas Forks now that your business is concluded?" "Got a piece of land not far from town," he replied, a smile tugging at his lips. Might be time to build something on it, something lasting. His gaze held hers, full of promise. If I had a reason to stay. I can think of at least one good reason, she whispered, her free hand rising to touch the cameo at her throat, the symbol of his thoughtfulness, of the connection that had grown between them since that fateful day on the mountain pass. Tyler's smile broadened, transforming his face. Without regard for propriety or watching eyes, he drew her into his arms. Then I'd best get to building, school teacher. Winter's coming, and we've got a future to start. As his lips found hers, Lillian knew with absolute certainty that her journey west, with all its dangers and unexpected turns, had led her exactly where she was meant to be. Autumn deepened into winter, bringing snow to the high mountains around Animas Forks. The town weathered significant changes following Lewis Thornton's arrest. The mine continued operations under new management, with James Thornton placed under the guardianship of Judge Wheeler until he came of age. The boy showed remarkable resilience, throwing himself into his studies and gradually earning the respect of townspeople who might have held his father's crimes against him. For Lillian, the months brought joy she had never dared imagine in her Boston life. Her school thrived, with more families settling in the area as news of silver discoveries spread. The promised new schoolhouse was still built, though funded by the town council rather than Thornton's tainted money. And most significantly, her relationship with Tyler blossomed like wildflowers after spring rain. Tyler spent the winter months building a proper house on his land, a comfortable two-story structure with a wide porch overlooking the valley. Lillian visited whenever weather permitted, sometimes bringing students for nature lessons, other times coming alone to share quiet moments with the man who had captured her heart so unexpectedly. They were married on the first day of spring, 1877, with the entire town in attendance. Margaret Caldwell wept openly. Sarah Jennings caught the bouquet of mountain wildflowers, and even Marshall Bradley was seen discreetly wiping his eyes during the ceremony. James Thornton stood proudly as Tyler's best man, a gesture of reconciliation that symbolized healing for both of them. After a brief honeymoon in Denver, they returned to Animas Forks to begin their life together. Lillian continued teaching, riding to town each morning on a gentle mare Tyler had trained specifically for her, while he turned his attention from bounty hunting to raising horses, a profession that utilized his tracking and outdoor skills while keeping him closer to home. On the anniversary of their first meeting, the day the stagecoach was ambushed, Tyler surprised Lillian with a special gift. He led her blindfolded onto their porch, positioning her carefully before removing the cloth from her eyes. "Oh, Tyler," she gasped, taking in the sight before her. A garden had been planted, bursting with the same wildflowers she had gathered for the stagecoach driver's grave 1 year earlier. In the center stood a small wrought iron bench, perfect for quiet contemplation. "Thought you might like a place to sit and watch the sunset," he said, his arm slipping around her waist, "and to remember how far we've come." Lillian turned in his embrace, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. "It's perfect. This life we've built, it's more than I ever dreamed possible." "Got something else for you too," he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small box, opening it to reveal a delicate gold band set with a small diamond. "To go with your wedding ring. Anniversary gift." "Tyler," she breathed, letting him slide the ring onto her finger beside the simple band they had exchanged at their wedding. "It's beautiful. Not as beautiful as you." His eyes, warm and tender, held hers. "Not nearly as beautiful as watching you these past months building our life together." Hand in hand, they sat on the new bench, watching as the setting sun painted the mountains in hues of gold and crimson. Lillian rested her head against Tyler's shoulder, reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. "Do you ever wonder," she asked softly, "what might have happened if my stagecoach hadn't been ambushed that day, if our paths had never crossed?" Tyler's arm tightened around her. "Some things are meant to be, schoolteacher. One way or another, I believe we would have found each other." As twilight settled over their mountain home, Lillian knew he was right. From the moment he had appeared at that stagecoach door, rifle in hand and determination in his eyes, their fates had been intertwined. What had begun in danger and uncertainty had blossomed into love and purpose, a love strong enough to heal old wounds and build new dreams in the shadow of the Colorado mountains. And as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Tyler kissed her again, a promise of all the tomorrows yet to come.